Imagine you sit down at your computer, type in your email address, punch in your password, and hit enter. There's that brief pause while the system decides if it's really you. Most folks assume that pause is just the password check. If the password matches, you're in, right? Actually, no. A lot more happens behind the scenes than you probably realize. While you're waiting, Microsoft 365 runs a series of checks in the background. It looks at where you are, what device you're using, and whether this sign-in seems normal or suspicious. And it does all of that before it lets you through the door. By the end of this episode, you'll understand what conditional access is, how it works every single time you sign in, and why it's one of the most important security controls in your Microsoft 365 tenant. So let's start with the simplest definition. What actually is conditional access? Here's the definition in plain English. Conditional access is a policy engine that checks context before letting someone in. It doesn't just look at your password and say, good enough. Instead, it asks extra questions about who you are and what's happening around your sign-in. Think of it like a nightclub bouncer. You show your ID at the door, that's your username and password. But a good bouncer doesn't just glance at it and wave you through. They check your name on the guest list, look at what you're wearing, and might even remember if you've caused trouble before. Conditional access does the same thing. It checks your identity against rules, sees where you're coming from, checks your device, and decides if everything looks right before letting you in. Now here's a key point. Conditional access runs after you've already typed your password. It's not a replacement for multi-factor authentication. It's an extra layer on top. Think of it as the second checkpoint after you've shown your ID at the front door. The logic is simple. If-then. If a user tries to access a cloud app and they meet certain conditions, then enforce this rule. For example, if someone is trying to access Outlook from outside the office, then require multi-factor authentication. That's the basic structure behind every conditional access policy. Why passwords aren't enough anymore? So why do we need this extra step? Because passwords get stolen every single day. Phishing attacks, data breaches, people reusing the same password across multiple sites. Your password could be compromised right now and you would not even know it. You might be thinking, well, that's fine. We have multi-factor authentication that protects us. And you are right, MFA does help a lot, but it is not a silver bullet. Imagine a hacker gets hold of one of your employees' passwords. They try to sign in from a country you have never done business with, using a device you have never seen before. MFA might stop them if it triggers a prompt. But what if the hacker also has access to that employee's phone? Or what if they are using a phishing attack that captures the MFA code too? Suddenly, MFA alone does not look so bulletproof. Here's a real-world example. A salesperson's credentials leak on the dark web. Without conditional access, an attacker can sign in from anywhere in the world. They can access email, files, customer data, everything, and you would never know until it is too late. The old way was all or nothing. You gave a user a license, and they could sign in from any device, any location, any network. No context, no intelligence, just a password check and then full access. Conditional access changes that completely. It adds context to every sign-in. It looks at where you are, what device you are using, what app you are trying to open, how risky the sign-in looks based on Microsoft's analysis. It turns a flat yes or no decision into a smart layered judgment. The signals, what conditional access looks at. So what exactly does conditional access check? Let's break it down into the signals it uses to make its decision. Identity is the first signal. Who are you? Are you a regular employee, an admin with elevated privileges, or a guest from outside the company? Conditional access looks at your user account and what groups you belong to. An admin trying to sign in might face stricter rules than a standard user. A guest might be blocked from certain apps entirely. Your identity determines the baseline of what is allowed. Location is next. Where is this sign-in coming from? If you are connecting from the office network, that is a trusted location. Conditional access knows the IP range of your company headquarters. Signing in from a coffee shop in another country raises a flag. If the system cannot even figure out where you are, that is another flag. Location is a powerful signal because it is hard to fake. Device also matters. What are you using to sign in? A company laptop managed by Intune and compliant with your security policies? Or a personal phone with no security controls at all? Conditional access can check whether the device is enrolled in management, has encryption enabled, and is up to date on security patches. An unmanaged device might get blocked or limited. The application matters too. What app are you trying to reach? Outlook, SharePoint, Teams, a custom business application? Not all apps have the same security requirements. A finance system handling sensitive data might require stricter controls than a team collaboration space. Conditional access lets you set different rules for different apps. If you have the right license, there's another layer, sign-in risk. Microsoft uses machine learning to score every sign-in in real time. It looks for suspicious patterns. Impossible travel, where a user signs in from New York and then 5 minutes later from London. Anonymous IP addresses, leaked credentials from known data breaches. The system assigns a risk level, low, medium, or high, and conditional access can act on that. There is also user risk. This is different from sign-in risk. User risk looks at the account itself. Has this user's password appeared in a breach? Has there been unusual activity over time? If the system detects that an account might be compromised, it can block access until the user resets their password. Finally, there is authentication context. This lets you attach extra security requirements to specific sensitive content. For example, anyone trying to access the finance SharePoint site must use a compliant device and a phishing-resistant MFA method. It protects your most valuable data without slowing down everything else. Once these signals are collected, the policy engine decides what to do. Let's see how that works. The decision engine, how policies work. Every conditional access policy works like an if-then rule. You pick the signals as conditions, then decide what action to take. That's really all it is. So there are three main parts to a policy. The first part is assignments, who the policy applies to, which app they're trying to reach, and what conditions trigger the rule. The second part is access controls. What happens when those conditions are met? Do you grant access, block it, or require something like MFA or a compliant device? The third part is session controls, and those manage what happens after someone is signed in. For example, how often they need to re-authenticate. Let me give you a concrete example. If a user is in the sales group and is trying to access SharePoint from an unmanaged device, then block access. That's a complete policy right there. Who, what app, what condition, what action. Grant controls are flexible. You can require multiple things at once. Say you want a user to complete MFA and also use a compliant device. Both conditions must be met. Or you could say they need one or the other. The system lets you choose. Now, block is the most powerful control. If any policy says block, block wins. There are no exceptions, except for exclusions you explicitly set. That's why you need to be careful. One mistake and you could lock out your entire organization. Before you turn a policy on, there's a critical feature you need to know about. Report-only mode. This lets you see what a policy would do before it actually enforces anything. You can run a policy and report only for a week, check the sign-in logs, and see how many users would have been blocked or prompted for MFA. It's a safe way to test without breaking anything. Now that you understand the engine, let's talk about the most common policies every business should have. The big three, baseline policies for day one. So what should you actually set up first? Let me give you the three baseline policies that every business should have from day one, not day 30 and not after an audit. Policy number one is the foundation. Require MFA for all users, not just admins, everyone. Every single person who signs into your tenant needs to prove who they are with a second factor. But here's the important part. Not all MFA is created equal. You don't want people using SMS codes or voice calls. Those methods are weak. They can be intercepted. What you want is something stronger. Microsoft has something called authentication strengths that lets you pick exactly which methods are acceptable. The Microsoft Authenticator app, FIDO2 security keys, Windows Hello for business, those are the good ones. So when you create your MFA policy, don't just check the box that says require MFA. Be specific. Choose the strong methods only. Policy number two, block legacy authentication. This one sounds technical, but it's simple. There are old protocols that Microsoft 365 still supports. POP, IMAP, SMTP, older versions of Exchange ActiveSync. These protocols were built before anyone thought about multi-factor authentication, and they don't support it. So if an attacker gets a password, they can use one of these old protocols to sign in and completely bypass your MFA. That's a huge gap. The fix is straightforward. Create a conditional access policy that blocks all legacy authentication for all users. Unless you have a very specific business need for an old scanner or printer that uses SMTP, turn it off. It's one of the highest impact security controls you can enable. Policy number three, require compliant devices for admins. Admin accounts are the crown jewels of your tenant. If someone compromises a global admin account, they own everything, so you need to lock those accounts down harder than anyone else. This policy says that anyone with an admin role must use a company-owned device that meets your security requirements, enrolled in management, encryption-enabled like BitLocker, Defender running, and up-to-date on patches. If an admin tries to sign in from a personal laptop or an old machine that doesn't meet those standards, access is blocked. It's a simple way to make sure your most powerful accounts are also your most protected. Before I move on, I need to talk about something critical: break glass accounts. These are emergency admin accounts that you keep outside of your conditional access policies. You create at least two of them. They use long, complex passwords and phishing-resistant MFA like a FIDO2 security key. You store the credentials securely, maybe in a safe or a locked cabinet. The purpose is simple. If you accidentally lock yourself out of your tenant with a bad policy, you can use a break glass account to get back in. They are excluded from every conditional access policy. That's by design. Without them, you risk being locked out of your own system with no way back in. Why only 3 policies for day one? Because you want to focus on the highest impact controls first. These 3 close the biggest security gaps. MFA stops most credential theft. Blocking legacy auth closes the back door. Compliant devices for admins protects your most sensitive accounts. You can fine-tune later with more granular policies, but start here. Advanced policies, risk and personas. Once the basics are in place, you can add more advanced controls. That's where risk-based policies and persona-based rules come in. Sign-in risk policies use Microsoft's machine learning to watch every login attempt in real time. If someone tries to sign in from an anonymous IP address or the system detects impossible travel, like a login from New York, and then Tokyo 10 minutes later, it scores that sign-in as high risk. From there, you set a policy that says if the risk is high, block access or force MFA immediately. The catch is you need an Entra ID P2 license, but this is one of the most powerful controls you can add because it catches attacks that static rules miss. User risk policies look at the account itself over time, not just one sign-in event. If Microsoft detects that a user's credentials have appeared in a known data breach, it marks that user as high risk. You can then set a policy that blocks access until they reset their password. And yes, that also needs P2. Together, sign-in risk and user risk policies create a dynamic security layer that adapts to threats as they happen. Now, persona-based policies address a different problem. Not everyone in your organization has the same security needs. Your admins need the strictest rules, while contractors and temporary staff might need limited access, and guests from outside your company need different controls entirely. Persona-based policies let you group users by role and apply the right level of protection. Here's a concrete example. Contractors often use their own devices that you don't manage, so you have no idea if they're running antivirus or keeping up with patches. Instead of giving them full access, you create a policy that limits them to browser-only access, no desktop apps, no mobile apps, and even within the browser you restrict actions. They can view and edit files but can't download or sync them to their own device. That way, contractors stay productive without exposing your data to unnecessary risk. Authentication contexts take this idea further by protecting specific content within an app instead of the whole app. For instance, your finance team has a SharePoint site with sensitive financial data. You can attach an authentication context to that site, so anyone who tries to access it must use a compliant device and phishing-resistant MFA, even if they're already signed into Microsoft 365. It's precision targeting for your most sensitive information. Continuous access evaluation revokes access in near real time when something changes. If an admin disables an account or a device gets reported lost, the session ends immediately without waiting for the token to expire. That's critical for responding to incidents quickly. All of this sounds powerful, but how do you actually get started without breaking things? Getting started. From security defaults to custom policies. If you have a brand new tenant, you're not starting from zero because Microsoft enables something called security defaults by default. It's a basic set of protections that requires MFA for admins and blocks legacy authentication. It's a decent starting point, but it's limited. You can't customize it or target specific apps or users. It's a one-size-fits-all solution. The moment you create your first custom conditional access policy, security defaults automatically turn off, putting you in control. That's a good thing, but it also means you need to know what you're doing because you can't rely on the training wheels anymore. So here's how to do it safely. First, start with report-only mode for every new policy and let it run for at least a week. Then go into the sign-in logs and see what would have happened, like how many users would have been blocked or prompted for MFA. That data tells you if your policy is too strict or too loose before you enforce it. Second, use the What If tool in the Entra Admin Center to test a policy against a specific user, app, and location before turning it on. You can simulate exactly what would happen if someone tried to sign in from a coffee shop in another country using a personal device. It's a safe way to catch problems before they become real. Third, and this is critical, create your break glass accounts before you deploy any policies. I cannot stress this enough. If you accidentally create a policy that blocks all admins and you haven't set up an emergency account that's excluded from everything, you'll lock yourself out of your own tenant. The only way back in is to call Microsoft support and prove you own the domain, which can take days. So set up 2 break glass accounts stored securely with phishing-resistant MFA. Do it before you start. Fourth, deploy in phases. Don't turn on a policy for everyone on day one. Start with a small test group, maybe the IT team, and let it run for a few days. Check the logs to see if anyone got blocked unexpectedly. Then expand to a larger group and finally to all users. Each phase gives you a chance to catch issues before they affect the whole company. Monitor the sign-in logs throughout, and if you see unexpected blocks, adjust the policy before moving to the next phase. Recap: why this matters for your business. So why does all of this matter? Conditional access is the bouncer at the door that doesn't just check your ID, it looks at everything. Who you are, where you're connecting from, what device you're using, and whether your account looks like it's been compromised. It turns a simple yes or no password check into a smart decision based on the whole picture. Without it, anyone with a stolen password can walk right into your tenant from anywhere in the world. No questions asked, and when you think about how many passwords get stolen every single day, that's a scary thought. The 3 baseline policies alone close the biggest gaps. MFA stops most credential theft cold. Blocking legacy authentication closes a backdoor attacker's love. Requiring compliant devices for admins protects your most sensitive accounts. Just those 3 policies raise your security floor dramatically. And when you're ready to take it further, advanced policies give you precise protection without killing productivity. Risk-based controls catch attacks in real time. Persona-based rules treat different users differently. Authentication contexts protect your most sensitive data with surgical accuracy. You can be both secure and flexible. So here's your homework. Log into your Entra Admin Center. Go to Conditional Access. Check if you have at least those 3 baseline policies in place. If you don't, start with report-only mode and build from there. Don't wait for an audit or a breach to take action. If this episode helped you see the big picture, subscribe to Microsoft Knowledge Nuggets for more plain English explanations of security and identity. And share it with someone who's just starting their Microsoft 365 journey. They'll thank you for it.